Hey everyone, I'm Pastor Alec,
I'm Eli.
and today we're taking a short break from First and Second Kings, and we're gonna uh, stop and do a quick Christmas edition,
Yeah.
right? Talking about Christmas.
Yeah.
It's that time of year. So Eli, what do you have for me?
Well, first of all, I have a little about the birth of John the Baptist.
Okay.
And it says, "You will have joy and gladness, and many will rejoice at his birth." And that's Luke 1:14.
Okay.
So I think that's just a good way to express how we should be feeling at this time of year. with
Yeah.
Joy and cheer.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's something that joy and that gladness that this is a really, really good thing that's happening
Right.
for the whole world.
Yeah.
Right? And so this is, and it starts off as you noted, it's about John. We always think of Jesus when we think about those words,
Right. Yeah.
right? But even with John preparing the way of Jesus, this is a really big momentous event.
Right. Yeah. And yeah, it has to be because it's in Luke 1.
Yeah, that's right.
it's not
That's right.
hidden, it's not hidden away anywhere. It's
Right.
right there. Yeah.
Right at the beginning. Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Good.
So, yeah.
Thank you for that.
Another question is Matthew 1:17.
Matthew
All
1:17.
right, I'll go ahead and get to it really quick. So all the generations from Abraham to David are 14.
Yeah.
From David until captivity in Babylon are 14.
Yeah.
And from the captivity in Babylon until Christ are 14 generations.
Yeah.
Is there any significance in 14?
There is. In fact, all the significance there is really in that now when he says that, he's given you three sets within the genealogy. All right? He's
Okay.
broken up into three parts, Abraham to David, and David's the first king over all of Israel.
Correct.
Saul is kind of we've talked about that, kind of a wash in a lot of ways, but David is really one who unites the monarchy. And of course, David is the one that receives the promise of God that he will establish for him a kingdom forever.
Right.
Right. That his child will reign on the throne forever. So they're from Abraham to David, and David to the Babylonian captivity. Now, the Babylonian captivity is when it all falls apart. Right. We've talked about this with First and Second Kings. Right. How it's when they lose the land, they lose the king, they lose everything,
Right.
and get deported to Babylon, and then from Babylon to Jesus. And of course, if we were to go back to the beginning of the genealogy, it begins with Abraham, and the book opens, the book of the genealogy of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham.
Right.
So Matthew's picked out Abraham and Christ and David as these two major ancestors for good reason.
Right.
And then also has picked out the Babylonian captivity, which is a really big, really important for the Gospel of Matthew. It's the foil of the Gospel of Matthew.
Okay.
And so what he's done is he's done 14 generations between each one. Now, if you go to the genealogies in Luke, they're a little different, right? So he has picked out 14.
Okay.
All right. And all the generations from Abraham to David were 14 generations. Yeah, according to what I just gave you.
Right.
Right. So he's picked them out, and he's done this for a reason. And there's some people that, I think it's dangerous to play with numbers and numerical significance
Right.
when it comes to the Bible sometimes. But I think it's pretty well established that, well, okay, so the name David, Dalet, Vav, Dalet, that's how you spell it in Hebrew. And it numerically it adds up to 14.
Okay.
So some people have said, well, this is kind of this, it's called gematria. That's the name of this numeric practice, counting what the numerical significances are for letters and that kind of thing.
Okay,
So
yeah.
some people think that, well, there's 3 letters in the name David, and the whole name adds up to 14, and so Matthew's kind of playing
Okay.
on that. Now, there's another thing, really quick. There's another thing that with the name David, Dalet, Vav, Dalet, is the letter Vav is the word and in Hebrew. And an old Dalet actually looks like a triangle, like a Paleo Hebrew Dalet looks a lot like a triangle.
Right.
And so some people have interpreted that as Dalet and Dalet.
So that's why it's the Star of David.
Exactly.
triangles.
Very good.
I never knew that.
Right? So Yeah, and in Hebrew it's Magen David. It's the shield of David.
Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah. I mean, you can play around with that kind of thing, and
Right.
there might
So
be
it's
something to it.
kind of just like a Hebrew thing, I guess.
Yeah, like a
okay.
Hebrew thing.
Yeah.
It's like, well, yeah, it's a very Hebraic thing. That's a little bit of First Temple, or sorry, Second Temple Hebrew culture.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
And then one more. So
Mm-hmm.
Matthew 2 verses 10 through 12.
Matthew
And
2 verses 10 through 12.
there might have been a little after that as well.
Okay.
Yeah, with
So this is the Magi.
correct. So, before that, verse 9. After hearing the king, they went their way, and the star which they had seen in the east went on before them until it came and stood over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they rejoiced exceedingly with great joy. After coming into the house, they saw the child with Mary his mother, and they fell to the ground and worshipped him. Then, opening their treasures, they presented to him the gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned by God in a dream not to return to Herod, the Magi left for their own country by another way.
Yeah.
So I think that's pretty cool. It highlights how giving gifts for Christmas it's not really something to, everyone's like, don't twist Christmas to make it about gifts. And I'm not saying it should be about gifts, but I don't think it should be looked down upon to give gifts.
To give a gift.
Right,
yeah, sure.
But is there any specific reason they brought gifts other than God being in their dream?
Yeah. Oh, I think there is. If you here, let's do a little history. All right.
Okay.
I think this is actually a pretty meaningful event. Now, remember, how did Matthew frame the beginning of his gospel? Abraham to David, David to the Babylonian captivity, the Babylonian captivity to the coming of the Christ. If I open up to Isaiah chapter 40, Isaiah chapter 40 that's comfort my people, says your God. Speak tenderly to Jerusalem and cry to her, the warfare is ended, that her iniquity is pardoned, that she has received from the Lord's hand double for all her sins. A voice cries in the wilderness, prepare the way of the Lord, make straight in the desert a highway for our God. And there's a lot I could say about that.
Right.
But this is, you see this prophecy with John the Baptist appearing on the scene. This is what the Gospels use to talk about John.
Okay.
And you see it in the Gospel of Matthew. It's also, if you go just a few verses down, this is where you get, all flesh is grass, and all its beauty is like the flower of the field. The grass withers, the flower fades. The grass withers, the flower fades, but the word of our God will stand forever, which you see quoted in the New Testament also. This passage is thought, Isaiah 40 to the end of the book, through chapter 66, is thought to be spoken as a promise to those who are returning from the Babylonian exile.
Okay.
God suffers with his people, and he brings restoration. And that's kind of a theme for the last part of the book of Isaiah. Let me read for you chapter 39. It's only 8 verses. Okay. All right?
I was going to say, I did see a lot of Isaiah.
A lot of Isaiah in Matthew.
Jesus.
And Isaiah is really concerned, again, with the Assyrian invasion, the Babylonian invasion, and God bringing his people back and bringing them restoration.
Right. Now, was Isaiah a prophet during the Babylonian capture?
No, he's a prophet before that.
Okay.
He's a prophet during the Assyrian rule.
Yeah, that's what I was
and
thinking.
so he sees it all coming with Assyria. All right, so Isaiah 39 says this. This is after a time where Hezekiah, who's a good king, who's kind of raised by Isaiah in a lot of ways, makes all these reforms, does all this really good stuff. He gets sick. All right, and he prays to God, he gets healed. All right, so this is what happens after. It says, at that time, Merodach Baladan, the son of Baladan, king of Babylon, sent envoys with letters and a present to Hezekiah. Okay, now remember, Babylon is on the Euphrates River. It's east.
Right.
Right? All right. Because you asked about the Magi, who came from the east.
Okay, yeah.
Okay. For he heard that he had been sick and had recovered. So he sends a present to King Hezekiah.
Right.
Kind of like what the Magi are doing with the Christ child. And Hezekiah welcomed them gladly, and he showed them his treasure house, the silver, the gold, the spices, the precious oil, his whole armory, all that was found in his storehouses. There was nothing in his house or in all his realm that Hezekiah did not show them. These envoys from Babylon.
Was this your sermon Sunday?
I talked about this on Sunday a little bit. Yeah,
say,
I mean, it wasn't
that
the main
sounded-
part, but
that
it was a
sounded
part
familiar.
of it. Yeah, good.
Okay.
You listen. Very
Yeah.
good. Okay. All right. So what he does is he shows him everything that's there.
Right.
Everything. Okay. And then Isaiah, the prophet, came to King Hezekiah and said to him, "What did these men say?" These guys from Babylon, this great empire that there's going to be a great empire soon.
Right.
It's going to take over Assyria and it's going to wipe out Jerusalem. What did these men say? And from where did they come to you? Like Isaiah knows.
Right.
Hezekiah said, "They have come to me from a far country, from Babylon." He said, "What have they seen in your house?" All right, so maybe this visit wasn't as, good, well-intentioned as as Hezekiah thought. Hezekiah answered, "They have seen all that is in my house. There is nothing in my storehouses that I did not show them." And Isaiah is going, "Oh my." Then Isaiah said to Hezekiah, "Hear the word of the Lord of hosts. Behold, the days are coming when all that is in your house and that which your fathers have stored up till this day shall be carried to Babylon, and nothing shall be left." Right? So there's going to come a time, Hezekiah, and it's not going to happen during his time. It's going to happen during his kids' time, and Hezekiah is very happy it's not going to happen in his own time. Right? But there's going to come a time where Babylon's going to take everything. And that really is, again, the backdrop for the Gospel of Matthew. That's the Emmanuel prophecy. The Emmanuel prophecy is about Assyria, and that's in Matthew,
Okay. Yeah.
right? And so what happens with this great reversal is that the Magi come, and they're looking for the king who's born, and they want to worship him.
Now are the Magi from
They're from the east.
not necessarily Babylon?
Babylon, Assyria, Persia, the
Right.
east, that's the place of the conquering empires.
Okay, yeah.
Right? That's the place where the people come and take the Israelites and the Judahites away.
Right.
Right? And so now what Matthew's showing us is that they've come, and we don't know how many of them there were. They have 3 gifts,
Right.
but we have no idea how big of a group this was. But they're coming, and they're coming to worship the newborn king.
Okay.
And when they come to Herod the Great at first, he's like, they come to Jerusalem because they assume, of course, that's where the new king is born.
Right. Yeah.
Right? He's the son of Herod. He must be. And Herod's like, I don't know what you're talking about. But you need to find him.
Right.
And so they do. And so that's the scene then in Matthew, is that they come, and rather than being the plunderers, they come and now they're bringing gifts.
Okay.
And this is kind of this symbolic gesture that they don't even realize what's happening in some sense.
Right.
But I think it's Matthew is telling us, and God is showing us, that the nations, even the conquering nations, will bow down to the Christ child.
Right. Yeah, and I think it did mention that. It said some, I can't remember exactly, but I was reading it this morning. It said ruler of all, and that's why they all worshipped him.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, he is the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's what it was.
And that's what, and they come and they acknowledge that, which is again a great reversal
Right.
from this terrible point in the history of God's people where they were deported to Babylon.
Right.
And crushed by the Assyrians before that.
I've never really tied it, especially, I mean, that's like almost what we're getting up to in
It is.
Second Kings right now, and I've never tied it to that.
That's right. I think that's a good reason why we're doing First and Second Kings.
Yeah.
It's the Babylonian captivity is such an important part of the history of the people of Israel, and you see that from Matthew. I mean, for Jesus to be the Emmanuel child, the prophet, that's only in Matthew. Right, and the wise men or the Magi, it's only in Matthew. Like it's something
Okay.
very specific that Matthew is doing.
Right.
Right.
I didn't know that either.
Right. Shepherds in Luke, wise men in Matthew.
Okay.
And so, Luke is doing something also very specific. Okay, but it's different. But Matthew's showing us that this is like Jesus is the Emmanuel child, which means a lot of things. For one, it means that there will be destruction.
Right.
So Jerusalem's going to be destroyed again. It was destroyed with the first time that there was a child born, and who was called Emmanuel, and now it's going to happen again.
Yeah.
It also means that God is with his people and that he will save those who trust in him. And that's how the Gospel of Matthew ends. See, it begins with the genealogies
Right.
of,
Abraham to David.
David to the Babylonian captivity to the Christ, and he's the son of David, the son of Abraham. And how does it end? It ends with the all authority on heaven and earth has been given to me. This is the Great Commission. This is Matthew 28. So he's been given all authority. So
Right.
he's the son of David.
Right.
And then what does he say to do? Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, which is the fulfillment of the prophecy of Abraham,
Right.
that he will be called the father of many nations. And people think, oh, that means that he's going to have this kid, and they're going to have this kid, and they're going to be a bunch of nations that come from him. And that does happen. But the fuller prophecy is actually that happens when Jesus brings us all into Abraham's family.
Okay.
Right, we're brought in as spiritual children of Abraham. So go make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, doing all that I've commanded you. And behold, I am with you, right? Emmanuel,
Yeah.
God with us. I'm with you always to the end of the age. And again, you kind of close again with that Davidic prophecy, right?
Yeah.
So it begins and ends where he is the child of David, son of Abraham, and again, in the Gospel of Matthew, it is against the foil of the Babylonian captivity.
Right. That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
It's just like a whole loop, I guess.
It kind of is, yeah. Yeah, and that's what Christmas means in Matthew, is that the Emmanuel child has come, but this time the Eastern empires are bowing down to him.
Right. And then I noticed you said the shepherds in Luke.
Yeah.
And I remember reading about the shepherds when they came first,
Yeah.
and with their flock.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the shepherds and their whole thing is in Luke is you have this, instead of, for Matthew, it's very much this king of Israel and the Eastern conquering nations. And you
Right.
find out the king of Israel is actually king of everyone, and that's Jesus.
Right.
And with Luke, it's a little different. It's put against the Roman backdrop. And so that's why
Right.
you get all the information about the census. Caesar Augustus, who's the first emperor of Rome, is doing all this, doing the census and all this other stuff. And it's against this backdrop of this newly minted Roman Empire, which only had been around for like 20 years at this point.
Yeah.
It's brand new.
I was going to ask you that.
Yeah, it's only been. That's why they're doing it. It's a power play, because this kind of new emperor, he's made himself emperor.
Right.
Because Julius Caesar wanted to be emperor, and they killed him, and so his adopted son Octavian actually did it. He went by the name Caesar Augustus, won from these titles, and what happens with the shepherds? It's different. So the Magi, they're Easterners, and they bring gifts. They're not plunderers. They're gift givers now,
Right.
and they bow down to worship, right? And Luke, what you get against the backdrop of this newly minted Roman Empire and the Pax Romana, the peace of Rome, which is instituted by the Roman armies. Now you got the shepherds that are interacting with a different army, and that's
Okay,
the
yeah.
army of heaven,
Yeah.
and that's the angelic hosts. We say hosts, but that means army.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
So they're seeing the armies of God in the sky.
Right.
And that's what Luke is doing. You get the earthly kind of Roman peace versus the heavenly peace.
Right.
And they're very different kinds of peace. And so even to the point in the triumphal entry, in the Gospel of Luke, where, there's this declaration of peace on earth from the angels to the shepherds,
Yeah.
right? The birth of Christ. The triumphal entry, it's the one place, it's only in the Gospel of Luke, where when they're singing Psalm 118, that's the song that they're singing when Jesus comes in, and they add the phrase peace in heaven, right? So there's
Okay,
this bit about peace in the Gospel
Right.
of Luke, which is, again, I think, directly up against the backdrop of the Pax Romana, the peace of Rome.
Yeah.
So the different gospel writers are doing different things,
Right,
and they're
and
saying
then-
a very similar message that Jesus reigns over heaven and earth. They're just doing it different ways.
Right. Now, is Matthew? What about Mark?
Mark and John do very different
That's what I was
things.
going to ask.
Yeah, that's probably a whole different conversation.
That was like verbatim what my question was.
Well, you notice Mark doesn't have a Christmas story, and
Yeah.
John doesn't either. John has a beginning of the world story,
yeah.
and they're doing something very different. So
Right.
that's probably beyond the scope of
Okay.
this.
I
They're
gotcha.
doing also something really cool, just different.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was just something I noticed as I was reading today.
Yeah.
How I don't even think I got into Mark, but I was reading a little bit of John,
Yeah.
and I noticed how different it was.
Yeah.
Because it was talking about Jesus later on. like when they brought him into Jerusalem for the first time, and stuff like that.
Well, that's Luke.
That's that. Okay, that.
Yeah,
was
that's Luke. Luke,
Okay.
he goes into Jerusalem a couple times, and you actually see that he's not just like Mary and Joseph alone with a newborn child,
Right.
right? So it's actually like they're there with a bunch of people,
Yeah.
right? They've made the trip with a bunch of people. They're all probably heading into for the census. They're going into Bethlehem for this new census they've got to do
Right.
now. This new nonsense they've got to put up with, and so they go down there, and they're probably with a big group of people. And the word "inn" is really deceiving in the Gospel of Luke. It's not. That's not what it is in Greek. Like it's like the guest room of the house,
Yeah.
or just where people sleep. So they probably, they're probably there with their family members, who
Right.
are all there for the census. They're all related to each other, and because there's so many people there, because they're there for the census, the house that they're staying in, there's not any room for a newborn child, with this huge group of people who knows how many
Right.
people are in this house. And so what they do is they probably, if it's anything like what they think a typical house was like in Bethlehem during the time, probably took the baby downstairs to sleep where all the animals come in at night,
Okay. Yeah.
right? Which probably wasn't very unusual anyway,
Yeah.
right? And so this whole thing with there's no room for them in like the inn, which means motel or something,
Yeah.
or and there's like an innkeeper and all
Right.
all this other stuff, and it's just Mary and Joseph kind of alone and
themselves,
by them.
yeah.
Yeah, like that's not not the
Right.
picture it's painting. That's something
Yeah.
that we do that.
Right. Yeah. And it just gets lost over time.
Yeah. So it's probably not very. I think the point is that it's actually not a very unusual birth,
Right.
right? It's that it's not a royal Jerusalem palace birth,
Right.
but it's not a
Like
very
birth of a
unusual
king.
birth. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's just a lowly kind of normal person birth, which
Right.
is, I mean, and I think the part where there's probably too many people up there in the guest room, and they've got to go down and be with the animals. It also, again, which might have been a common thing anyway, but it does show the kind of the humility. Like Jesus
Yeah.
is not, even in his birth, he's not above that.
Right.
Like it's
He's still human.
yeah, his existence is
Right.
not above that. He is human, and he's with his creation. They were,
Right.
they were all created through him.
Yeah.
Right. So
I think that is kind of cool. Like a little, I don't know, like not like a side note, but like I guess illusion, because he does talk about humility like his whole life.
Yeah.
He's humble and
Well,
doesn't.
again, and that's the Gospel of Luke. You see that most in the Gospel
Yeah.
of Luke, right? And
Yeah.
that all happens in the Gospel of Luke.
Okay.
Right? So yeah, so when you read just one gospel and you see that there's all this stuff going on in this is why I think, of course there's lots of different ways to do this. There's lots of different ways to think about think about the nativity and celebrate it. And oftentimes we kind of put all the pictures together, which is
Right.
fine. I mean, they all happen, so you can put them all together. But it would be cool, I think. What if you did like a nativity according to Matthew, or a nativity according to Luke?
Yeah.
And you would
would
have
be cool.
you'd have a very specific message
Right.
about who Jesus is and what he's here for. And the Luke nativity and the Matthew nativity wouldn't be all that different from each other as far as what the message is.
Right.
But they would be told in very different ways, and you get very different things out of
Yeah.
them too. Which
That
I
would be
think,
kind of cool.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that about answers everything I had.
cool. Well, good. Well,
Yeah. I definitely learned a lot about
Thanks.
Christmas that I didn't know.
good. Well, thanks for bringing your Christmas questions,
yeah.
and
Yeah.
we pray that anyone watching has a Merry Christmas.
Yeah. Merry Christmas.
And we celebrate the coming of our Lord Jesus and look forward to him coming again.